Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. In today's episode, we're diving into a topic that's shaking up the world of defense contracting and compliance. Today's topic, understanding the new affirming official role for SPRS and CMMC self-attestation. Well, what's the big deal about this new role? Why does it matter? And what exactly are you signing up for when you become the one affirming compliance? Trust me, it's not as simple as just clicking submit. Stick around to learn why your role might be the new compliance superhero, cape optional. We'll also cover how this impacts your supplier performance risk system, or SPRS, scoring, and what the Department of Defense expects from you. Spoiler, there's paperwork, but don't worry, we've got your back. Let's gear up and dive in. The name's Bond, James Bond. We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, president of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC professional assessor. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
So if there are those of you that have followed our YouTube channel as well as this podcast, and if you're following this podcast, you've seen our YouTube channel. Mike, you did just release a YouTube video about this topic, but we wanted to go a little bit more in depth for the specific podcast listeners that we have. So that being said, we're talking about the new affirming official role in CMMC and SPRS. So let's jump right in and say, what exactly is the affirming official role in CMMC self-attestation and why was it created?
Yeah, so I think that one, appreciate you bringing this up as a topic this week. I think that it's a topic that there's just been so little sort of information put out there on, and yet there's such massive consequences to this role. So before we dive into the sort of CMMC affirming official or AO responsibility, I want to go back to another compliance standard that hopefully most of our audience is familiar with called ITAR. And if you're familiar at all with ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms, regulation, basically what happened was they deemed some information that is just so vital to not reach foreign people's eyes and ears and hands that they said, look, we're going to make this ITAR restricted, right? You can't export this to a foreign person. You can't expose them to this information because it could be a national security risk. So they created this ITAR thing, and then what they did, and by the way, that was 1976, they then created a registering official for ITAR. And that is the point person who essentially signs off when they register your company as doing business with ITAR information, with the DDTC, the Directorate of Defense Trade Control. And what they do is they basically say, okay, so, you're going to be the person responsible for making sure your company's compliant. And then in true government fashion, when something's really important, they said, if you don't do this right, we're going to put you in jail. And then we're going to apply civil penalties. So like sue you. And then on top of that, it's going to transcend the corporate veil, right? So like these are personnel penalties that they hold you personally accountable. So what's interesting is in the business world, you typically enjoy kind of this shield, right? You operate under an LLC or a corporation, or legal entity of some kind, and like whatever you do there remains the responsibility of that corporation, legal entity, et cetera. However, when it comes to information and government and defense information is like, we don't care about any corporate veil. We're piercing this and it doesn't even exist. And if you do something to endanger our country, you're going to jail for sure. So what it appears to me that they have done is they have essentially copied the ITAR registering official as the affirming official for CMMC. So they're saying, hey, you're going to be the person, or as I like to say, the throat to choke when we find out that you are not CMMC compliant. And, this now goes from no personal accountability to personal accountability. And they're basically saying that the affirming official has to be some sort of an executive with the company or a key stakeholder or someone of sort of importance and value. Again, high level manager, whatever it may be. But you're naming a person who's going to take legal liability over being able to vouch for the fact that you are meeting these CMMC requirements. Now, here's the wild part. Um, the wild part about this is, and I'm going to read directly from the current CMMC Level 1 self-attestation and affirmation screen in the SPRS system, where you affirm this, sign off on it. It says submission of this assessment result, and there's a CMMC unique ID, or affirmation indicates that your name personally as the affirming official responsible for cybersecurity maturity model certification CMMC for company name, has reviewed and approved the submission and attests that the information systems within or covered by the scope of the CMMC assessment are compliant with CMMC requirements as defined in 32 CFR 170, that's federal law. Misrepresentation of the CMMC compliance status to the government may result in criminal prosecution, including actions under Section 1001, Title 18 of the United States Code Civil Liability under the False Claims Act, and contract remedies as determined appropriate by the contracting officer. And then you have to check boxes. I certify that I have read the above statement and affirm. You're basically signing a legal contract with the government directly, stating that you're affirming that the organization's meeting this. Now, I got to tell you, there's going to be a lot of pushback from a lot of people in organizations. Um, if you're in upper management at a larger company and you're pressuring an IT director or someone else to go attest to this, and they're pushing back and telling you that no, they haven't met all the controls, you just need to stop immediately. Just you can't do that. First off, I feel pretty confident, someone could sue you for that because you're forcing them to make a legal attestation of a false claim. You can get the company in trouble, you in trouble. You do not want to do that. Okay. And if you are an AO or an affirming official and you don't feel comfortable signing it, don't. I don't think you should. These are pretty heavy duty direct penalties. I mean, they're not mincing words here. And again, it used to be the case, I haven't looked lately, but if you go to the Director of Defense Trade Control website, they used to have a streaming list of names of people who have gone to jail for ITAR violations. They literally just stream it across the top of the website. It's amazing. So really serious stuff. I honestly did not really expect for them to go on the personal level and sort of lay criminal liability at the feet of the people signing this thing so soon. I did think it would happen. I had predicted it would happen. If you watch a lot of my videos from years ago, I said, "Hey, I think this thing's going the way of ITAR," and it's real. It's real fast. They're not playing around. They've got a blueprint for ITAR on how to keep this stuff safe, and they're rolling it out to CUI. So, yeah, it's a really big deal, Roman. To me, it's a massive acceleration on what I thought would have happened. I mean, I think they're really aggressively moving on this, and it makes a lot of sense.
All right, exactly. I think, at the time that this podcast episode comes out, a couple weeks ago, you did a video on the Affirming Official on YouTube. If you want a more direct explanation of what this is, go to the YouTube channel, look up that video. But what are the best practices for maintaining evidence of compliance to support SPRS self-attestation?
Um, that's a great question. I think that number one is you should, as you develop your system security plan and as you implement things throughout your plan of action and milestones, you should be able to know where settings are in your system, and you should be documenting those within your policies and standard operating procedures. I'll tell you one of the big surprises that we had when we went through a DIBCAC DoD level, CMMC level 2 audit with DIBCAC themselves was the sheer level of documentation that they were looking for. I really, having not really known folks that had gone through it, we were kind of early to the process. I was taken aback by how much documentation they really want to see. I mean, they wanted documentation in many cases where I thought they would have just looked in our systems. I was expecting to tour them through our systems and show them settings and things like that. And in a lot of cases, they kind of didn't care about that. They just wanted to see written policies that would demonstrate how things were supposed to be. I thought that was very interesting and very telling. Anywhere that you see the word define in a control or assessment point, you should have a written policy, and that written policy serves as the evidence. Um, Certainly need to be prepared to demonstrate your systems, but I think that one of the ways that they get through this faster is that they do, they take the policies as the evidence. So Yeah, a lot of policies, standard operating procedures, and documentation of your baseline configurations. That's what you really need to have when it comes to the evidence for this. So, is that hard to gather? Again, if you were taking screenshots and things like that, yes, I think it could. But it's almost made easier because you're just really recycling the policies you should have in place. Um, I think one thing to keep in mind is we have more than doubled the number of policies, almost tripled the number of policies and standard operating procedures since Q4 of last year when we went through that audit that we are putting into our compliance packages, and we're rapidly updating our clients with this documentation. It's a big deal. It's a massive shift. It's a massive shift from settings to documentation. For us, for our clients, etc. And it's a heavy burden. It's a big burden. Now, the good news is on-call's got it figured out. So that's the really good news is when you come to us and work with us and you get one of our gap analysis and solution design consultations, or you work with our virtual compliance officer service, or even if you've just got managed IT services with us, we will hand you basically a done for you set of policies, and it's massive. It's very extensive. Certainly there is some customization you've got to do, and you also have to implement and follow these policies. But the reality is that it's quite literally, and I think personally, it'd take you a year to 2 years to develop all of this on your own. So it's a huge leg up and really serves as a lot of evidence. And the good news is if you're one of our clients or you're looking to get compliant and you're looking for someone to help you with this, we make it easier than anyone else in the entire industry. On that note, I think it's so important to emphasize something that we've begun to realize is a major difference between on-call and everybody else. Everybody else in this marketplace seems to be following this trend where they are developing a compliant solution. Now, I'm not going to name names, but let's say you've got a email solution, for instance, and it's compliant to send and receive CUI through that email solution. Okay, great. Here's the problem. Your solution's compliant and you bought a compliant solution, but your company's not compliant, and that's what you're getting tested on. So unless you are working with a company that will address your company as a whole being compliant, you are wasting your money, in my opinion. We can probably make what you have compliant or figure out a way to document it properly. That is so misunderstood in this space. I mean, completely misunderstood. I think the biggest problem that C3PAs are having right now is they've got people who are willing to spend money with them, but they can't assess them because they're so far from actually being compliant, because there's just so much misinformation that's been thrown out in the marketplace about compliant solutions someone can buy versus your company actually having, a full set of documentation and you having trained personnel, et cetera. Um, you know, that's what you're supposed to have. It's not that you're supposed to have a compliant solution. You certainly need that too, but you, the company, need to be compliant. There's no one that can do that for you. So again, if that's like a big wake up call for a lot of people out there, particularly when we start talking about evidence, maybe it should be because I think a lot of the vendors in this space really have it wrong, and they just don't understand. So yeah, that's hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on the evidence required, and maybe even just conceptually how it needs to be different because it is not what most people think. And I think over this first year, there's going to be a lot of wake up calls when people fail this thing or realize that they're not even really close. But the good news is, if you're a client of On Call or if you're looking to become compliant, On Call understands this thing inside and out. This is what we eat, sleep, live, and breathe. We understand how to deal with the evidence portion of this, and we're excited to help.
Right. And you already mentioned a couple things, such as, however graphic it may seem, provide the AO providing the throat to choke, and you also mentioned these scary words of criminal penalties. So there may not be much else to say, but what penalties or consequences can result from incorrect self-attestation in the SPRS system?
Yeah, it is pretty scary, isn't it? Right. So, I mean, first off, we'll go for the attestation. The AO can go to jail, and it's that simple. Um, it, I don't know what could be scarier. I mean, look, no one's going to attest to this thing with that kind of a threat of penalty, I hope, unless you've really, really got it. And it's funny. We have a do-it-yourself course out there, and we encourage people to go out there. It's oncallacademy.com. We've got CMMC level 1 and 2 courses, but if you don't really feel comfortable with this, I think you really got to bring in a third party. I think a failure to bring in a third party at this point is, I'm not going to say that it's silly because it's not. I think you should be able to do it yourself. But I will say the amount of time that it would take to go from zero to comfortable and really understanding this stuff, I mean, it's years. And it seems like it's getting more complicated almost every day. So that's not good. From a penalty perspective, look, so then there's the personal, right? You can be sued. You can be personally held liable for a false attestation. You can go to jail. Then, from a company perspective, penalties for false claims are typically triple damages. So, let's say you've got $1 million contract, you made a false claim about being compliant, so you could win it and do the work. $3 million is the penalty. The range, then there's an incident, right? So for every piece of CUI found to have been not protected, it's anywhere from $13,946 to $27,894 per piece of CUI or per incident. This was apparently updated in February of 24. They can revoke your contract, yuck, and you can be blacklisted from doing business with the government and others. And again, we've got tons of examples from Aerojet Rocketdyne to Cisco to Penn State, Georgia Tech. I mean, they're not discriminating. If you feel like those are really, really big companies, they certainly are. But, the other $3 billion worth of false claims, those are under seal, and we don't know who all those went to. And there probably are a lot of small contractors hidden in there. So look, at the end of the day, as I always like to say, when our country's national security is at risk, the DoD and the DOJ are taking action. And it's pretty serious stuff. So all I can say is, this is not the time. This is not the time to be fooling around with trying to do this in such a way that, you're just checking the box. This is no longer a check the box activity at all.
Absolutely. And Mike, we actually have a bonus question today because when I was preparing questions, there were just too many good options. So we have four main questions today. The next one is, how does this new role, the affirming official, tie into maintaining readiness for future third-party assessments?
That's a great question. What's interesting is the affirming official is likely going to be the person who is the lead contact for a CMMC certification. In CMMC, you are required to provide a person who is leading the charge, if you will, or a person who is the point person for the lead assessor. So on the C3PAO side, they have a lead assessor, and on the OSC, right, the organization seeking certification, they're going to have a person who is their lead. And I personally believe that's going to be the affirming official in most cases. But interestingly, the affirming official does not necessarily have to be the compliance lead in the organization. So the affirming official could be a CEO, it could be an executive, it could be the person in charge of compliance if it's a larger company. But certainly it needs to be the person who, by law, has the authority to understand if the company is compliant. So it needs to be somebody with some authority for sure. Yeah, great, great question. There is a little bit of, in my opinion, a disconnect because there isn't a sort of rule that says the AO would also be the lead person in a CMMC certification audit. That allows companies to have some significant flexibility.
Absolutely. So we had an extra question standing in our way, but now we get to what we always finish with, our silly question. And being the huge Star Wars fan that I am, I was happy that this was one of the questions that was there to be had. So our silly question today is, so is being an affirming official kind of like being a compliance Jedi, or do you just get a lot more emails?
Well, you're probably going to have to do a lot more communication, that's for sure. Uh, I think that the affirming official does not necessarily need to be a compliance Jedi. But I will tell you, in most cases, I believe the affirming official will be those people we've worked with to create compliance heroes for their company. So as much as I love a good solid Jedi Knight, and Jedi Knights are certainly heroes in their own realm, you know what? We live in the world of compliance, and I think that uh, it's going to be those people who are the affirming official who are going to have to be the compliance hero and save the universe and make sure that companies are ready to attest and that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing and things like that. So I do think that is a necessary part of this. And I think that it's all It's all part of the mix. But yes, certainly the AO needs to know what's going on. But again, the AO does not have to be the person who is chiefly in charge of carrying out compliance. They just need to be exactly what it says, which is an affirming official, that they know or have been led to believe with reason that they are compliant and following the controls in CMMC level 2, which is basically NIST SP 800-171. So sort of like a Jedi, but in our world, we'd refer to those people as a compliance hero.
Absolutely. And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to extend our appreciation to Mike and thank him for telling us about the important new role of the affirming official. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman. Thanks for having me.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us via our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If they haven't already, what should they do, Mike?
Well, they should definitely like, subscribe, and tune into the next episode right after you tell a friend, because we are just diving deeper and deeper into CMMC level 2 and getting you guys the help you need.
You heard the man himself. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you know when new episodes like this one are released. And we truly appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.